Composing Gloves here. I'm wearing an orange hat, and today we're going to be talking about Pluck basses. Now, I want to say, I'm going to play this for you real fast. This is what we're going to be looking at making. Just be aware that your reproduction system, whatever system you're using, will play a big role on how this is perceived, because we're messing with some pretty low frequencies in ways that some systems struggle with. So I'm going to play it for you right now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that after. So here it is. So that's the sound. It is a really cool sound. Now, this lives down in the really low end though. It creates this sort of low rumble atmosphere. And for example, these are M50s. I switched to them from the Foztecs that I'm normally wearing because my Foztecs are rattling. The problem with some tracks like this tracking is that it's pretty low, and as a result, some systems can't produce it. Some systems will shake and rattle. So for example, I have a couple of JBLs right here and they sound awesome. So I can work on stuff like this and really get jamming. And I mean, we're just grooving. But over the headphones, I struggle to compose and do sound design of this sort over headphones like these. And so I normally have a pair of Beats, but one side of them broke. So I can't use those right now. So that's a little unfortunate. Now, there's a couple of interesting things going on here. You'll see that I have some tempo automation, which you may or may not be familiar with. Honestly, I should extend this out all the way, but we're going to talk about plucks as a concept. I'm going to show you how to make these particular sounds, but we're going to be looking at them more from a perspective of we're trying to make some minimalistic trance or something that is really reliant on just a really grooving pluck line. And so I do have some rhythmic things I'm going to say here, and this may be a little bit longer of a tutorial, but here we go. So we're just going to start off by selecting a new area to work with, and we're going to be going for an offbeat bass, basically an upbeat bass. So we're going to have the kick boom and then an upbeat boom, 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 like that, and they'll talk to each other. So one of the great things about this type of composition is they're generally out of each other's way right off the start, because the kick is happening on a different beat than the pluck. The trick is making sure your pluck doesn't bleed over to your kick and your kick doesn't bleed over to your pluck. Then you can pump them both up to sound unusually loud. Stuff that people who do more complicated compositions with, like, when I say that, I mean there's just more happening sound-wise. They're going to have a harder time mixing it because they're going to be fighting this battle. But for us, we're going to be just using that. So we have here, we're going to put it down each 4 steps. And I have this kick I already selected. If you have the Leviathan pack, this is the kick A14. If you have that. So I quite like this. This kick works with a huge number. It's one of my favorite kicks. Like normally you'll find yourself reaching for a couple that you are very familiar with, but you want to branch out and test out other kicks, okay? Now, I have some plucks already going on in here, and there's a number of things going on, and I feel like just designing plucks in front of you will help you out a lot more than doing this. But if you want to know what's going on, why the kick gets so loud here is because there's 2 of them happening in 2 separate patterns. So it just sums together, and so it gets louder. I like doing it that way because you get that added impact of the kick. And honestly, I could probably make this kick shorter and make 2 separate kicks, like a short kick and then a big kick. And that will create a similar impact because you want to be aware of headroom. But in this case, that's all that's really going on. So I can blow it up like to unusually large proportions. So basically what I'm saying is pick a kick, find a good kick. I am processing the kick, I believe. Am I? No, I'm not. There's nothing going on in this kick. So that kick you heard was a totally unprocessed kick, which is a pretty cool thing. So we're going to slap a kick down there, and we're going to find a new pattern. I'm just going to go pattern 8. So we're going to put down one every 4 beats and slap it down, and we are given, you should have this. Just a cool kick. And these headphones are rattling. That's not cool. I've had so many issues with headphones recently. I'm like sick of having issues with these. Anyways, we're going to put down a couple. Okay, so we're good to go there. Now, I should tell you this up front, on my master, my limiter has been reduced to what it should be by default. And then on TDR Nova, I have this, it's just a high pass filter. Because I have so much low end, I do not need anything. I believe it happens at 30 hertz. Oh, 28 hertz. I'm going to move it up to 30. So 30 and below, I just don't need. I have quite a sharp cutoff. This will do something though. With a sharp cutoff, this is happening. They don't show you it, but there's probably now maybe they figured out a way to do it, but there's probably a bit of a boost right here at this cutoff point, and it's also going to affect frequencies up here because of phase shifts and stuff. So I don't know if they have, if it is linear phase or whatever. I didn't think about it. I just put down a high pass filter, but I'm aware that those are things that could also be going on that I may need to compensate for later. So what we're going to do now is we're going to finally create the pluck. So we're going to go over here. We're going to add a new harmer because I have no idea what I'm using those other harmers for. And right now I'm going to go to my unsorted. That way it appears here. And I'm going to name this the tut harmer. That way I know which one I'm touching. So what we're going to do first is we need to get a little inspiration. So we're going to write down our notes. I'm going to stick to like C3 for now. This could possibly change later. So we're going to put down 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to put it, and it's already in our pattern. So we are good to go. And we have this. Now, that's pretty high, but we're going to do some processing, and then we'll see what it sounds like at the end. So the plucks are really sort of interesting things. When you want something like this to sound organic, there's a couple things you want to take into account. First off, in your track, no person on the planet, if they were playing a pluck noise, would make it perfect every single time. So when you have a pluck that comes in perfectly every single time, it's gonna sound robotic, but this is a synth, so it's supposed to sound robotic, but it's just gonna have this, it's almost uneasy to experience something like that. You'll jam to it still, it'll still be easy, but you can make it a little more natural. And what I've done here is we have this tempo automation, and we're gonna bring it up here. And I'm moving at 130 beats per minute. And I have this automation, and you can see that it's barely moving up and down, just barely. But this is enough to create a variation so that it's not quite as robotic. There's a little bit of give and take, but not so much that it makes the listener think we've shifted tempo. And so that's a really powerful dynamic way of sort of humanizing a whole bunch of stuff. So now, essentially what I've done is we can write things right on the grid, and they will be slightly off. So we'll get a much more fluid pluck line. So it'll sound a lot better. This is quite a common trick. It's used a lot with people who do cinematic scoring because they are trying to sound real. So they do things like this. And it's a really simple, just a real simple one. So anyways, that's what's going on there. So I've automated the tempo. So you see we're moving, it moves about like 1 BPM. So hardly anything noticeable. Now we approach the subject. This is the most important subject as far as plucks go. There is a beginning part of a sample. It's called the chiff, and it is used to, okay. So what they were trying to do is they were trying to make like a flute, right? But back in the day, they did not have enough memory to record a whole flute sample and play back the whole flute sample. It just took too many resources. So what they figured out was, hey, we can replace the end of the flute with a periodic sample, and the beginning of the flute, we need that bit. So they would only take the very, very beginning of the flute. It's called the chiff again, and that would create the characteristic sound of the flute because our ears are really sensitive to the beginnings of things. So a pluck has a very sensitive start, and by altering the start, you can change the timbre of your pluck quite substantially. And because the beginning of a pluck happens so fast, your ear actually cannot react fast enough. So the beginning of your pluck, you might try things like compressing the beginning quite heavily or doing other, maybe you're expanding. Expansion should probably be a little more constructive for your transients. But instead of it sounding louder, it will, on average, it will just simply change the character of your pluck. Unless you have a pluck that's got a long tail, if you have that, then you're going to be altering. If you bring up the sustain, then it's going to bring up the average loudness. So when you're messing with processing, you need to be sort of aware of these things. So right now we've got this, and we're going to do this a couple. So, okay, now back to one of the other most important things, or the most important thing about a pluck. We know that the chiff is the most important. So the way that we turn the volume down on our pluck, the way we filter it, is also mega important. So if I open this up here and go to unsorted, we have our harmer, and we see that we have a volume knob. A volume knob is basically an all-pass filter. It's the same thing as having, if we were to open up a fruity EQ equalizer, it's the same thing as doing this. It's like a filter that turns everything up and down at the same time. Now, some of course, some volume knobs aren't doing that. They work, maybe they are not as even or whatever, but it's basically doing something like this. Old synthesizers, the Plucks that people dream of, generally do not use volume knobs that do something like this. Instead, they use volume knobs that do something like this. It goes up and down using a low pass filter. The reason is back then they didn't doing different filter modules. You would just use that. Those are the tools that you had. You wanted to turn your volume on and off. Well, you use filters to do it. You don't use like a volume knob. Like that's too simple. We can't be doing stuff like that. And in our Reactor 5, and I'm saying this just as a little passing note, if you look at Monarch, which is based on an analog synth, we see here that our filter envelope, that's our actual envelope. It's one of the reasons why the cutoff and the resonance sounds so lush. So when people are trying to emulate it and they try to do it with the volume knob, you can just laugh in their face because they're not going to accomplish the same effect at all. So what we're going to do, all I'm saying is what we're going to do is we're going to use a filter to control the volume, to alter the timbre of our Pluck. So we're going to come into our unsorted, and we have a couple. Now we get to the point where we're like, what kind of filter do we want to use? So there's a huge number of options. We could come in here and pick one of these. And now I don't like these filters because the low end will bleed through. We could work around it with EQ and with this. Now I love these filters for other reasons. I'm just saying for this particular purpose, I am not a fan of using the low pass filters in here. They're just not as tight as I like them to be. So we're not going to be using the low pass filter in here. And now using a filter will change your sound quite dramatically. We'll look at the difference between a filter and a volume envelope here in a second. So we're going to come into where we've sent it, which I have not sent it anywhere yet. So we're going to send it somewhere. Bang. It's right after our kick, so it'll be easy to remember. And we're going to put a filter on it. Now, I have a variety of filter plugins. You probably also have a variety of filter plugins, but one of my favorites, there are two of them. The first one is called Fast, the Fruity Fast filter, the Fruity Fast Low Pass. I like it because, so let me just load it up here. So it's going to double-clicked it. Did not double-click it. There it goes. So it's really simple. It's just a low-pass filter, but essentially what happens is when this is down, and it shows you that it's off, it's really off. So it's a filter that turns on really fast. The downside to filters that are this responsive to what you're doing is they can create unusual artifacts, and sometimes they will let higher frequencies bleed through just due to the curve they use to engage the filter. But I really, really like this filter. I'm just telling you some things you should be aware of. It's why some filters are so expensive and others aren't, is maybe they put a lot of work in trying to get a particular result out of it. And that equation took a while to figure out. So they're going to charge you more because, you know, they had to experiment and do a bunch of stuff. What we're going to be using is the Fruity Free filter. And some people might not like this one as much because I'm not sure if the low pass one does this, but I know this one does. It puts a limit on 1600 hertz. So you're going to be filtering that. And so the downside is you lose that very, very high end. But if you do those listening exercises in the critical listening series, you're not going to miss this hardly at all because this is going to turn down so fast. This won't matter too much. But if you're really bent on getting this, you could use something like TDR Nova, and you could automate the high pass and you could keep that upper end. You want to be aware of resonance, peaks, and stuff. So anyways, I'm doing a lot of explaining just because I want to be pretty thorough about this. So here we're going to automate for a second, we're going to be automating our Pluck on and off using this filter, and there's some of the reasoning behind it. There's a whole load of additional reasoning, but this is some basic reasoning. So I'm going to automate it, and I'm going to make sure my Q is off because Q, if I have resonance going back and forth in my sound, it's going to sound like crap. So right now we have this. That sounds kind of lame, but now we have something like this. And it's much more Pluck-like when I say that. So let's compare this to the way it would sound if I were to use the volume automation. So let's just move this over here. So it sounds like that. And we're going to turn on our volume automation, or our volume envelope, and we're just going to do something, relatively similar. And we want to release on this. That's not tight enough. We'll do something. But you see, it's just all the frequencies fade off evenly. It's just not got that same lush nice feel to it. It's just not as nice. So we are not going to use that. We are instead going to use this. That's much more like what I want. And so now if we put it together, now we've not focused on timbre at all yet. We've focused principally, well, we focused on timbre like this, but we're focusing right now on just getting a nice pluck sound. Some people will reach for presets and stuff, but then you can't get really customized. The creating an interesting dynamic sound. I'm sorry, presets, they're good starting points though. I really do like them. It's nice because you can just start with a timbre that's already been made, and then you can just turn almost anything into a pluck using some of these methods. So if we play it, now it's a little messy at the beginning. Let's change our octave, see if, and so what we could do now is we'll start filtering and altering our timbre. So we go over here to unsorted. Cool. So now, okay. Next level, we are now done with that. Now we want to create some more interest. We want to make it sit better. So let's try turning on the sub. So we're gonna bring in a low harmonic. The reason is if we clone it, we'll get a very different sound than if we bring in a low harmonic. So for example, here's just bringing in an additional subharmonic. You get that really sort of boomy side on the low boom. If we bring in a clone, basically just, turn on another one. So that's actually, I kind of like the clone. You just experiment. Do a variation on them. Okay, cool. Now we are going to alter it with an EQ. So we're just going to make the high end sparkle a bit more, and we're going to mess with the low end some. So I'm just going to bring up the high. And also, I'm going to check the note. It would sound better if it was an A, because our kick, this is another thing about it. If you have tuned kicks, or you might consider tuning your kicks, you want them to be in tune. So I have a kick that's tuned to A, so it just grooves way better because now my kick and my note are one and the same. Okay, so we're just going to leave it at that. Now we're going to add in a little bit of distortion. Distortion can get quite out of hand, and we could use this distortion in here as sort of a color. But instead, let's go into our post-production, well, in our mixer, post-production, and we're going to add a wave shaper. So we have a wave shaper, woo! And this is going to add quite a bit of, it actually adds some sustain, so we want to be a little bit careful. But it's a good way of altering the timbre, and at the same time altering the envelope of our sound. It's because of the nature of what a wave shaper does. But we'll just play it and I'll just show you what it sounds like. Yep. We're going to do some really light stuff, nothing crazy. Now, another thing, let me make sure my resonance, yeah, it's off. Cool. Let's add another EQ. This time we're going to go with parametric EQ. Now we can mess with the tightness of this. And let's bring it down an octave. See that? That's a bad idea. Yeah. I kind of like it without the sub. A little less muddy. Cool. Now we are going to put it through one more round of EQ. And you might be saying, why are you doing so many separate EQ? Well, it's before and after the Fruity Wave Shaper, and sometimes just having multiple EQs you'll shape the sound differently than if you were to try and do it in one. Part of the reason is you might trick yourself visually because you have a way you think an EQ should look. That's a terrible thing you shouldn't do. You should just judge it by sound. But so that's another. So basically, you wouldn't do dips like so severe. Maybe for whatever reason you have this psychological block that's not a good thing. So opening up multiple EQs may be good. And also it just changes the way I'm going to do things. So I may boost in different areas. I'll create a different field of timbre. I just do things differently, basically. Not in. I know it sounds like, oh, because you're gonna have this perception of how things work before. Not necessarily because I can't get the same sound, but because I can go in and alter it easier when I open up more later. Now, right now, I'm using just one when I need them. I don't have like 3 or 4 in a row. But occasionally, I will do that just because it's a different way of working. You'll change the way the sounds you get. Okay, cool. Now, something that would be kind of neat is if now our kick right now is in the middle, and it's gonna, when we have 2 things in the middle, it's not gonna sound as big or as epic. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna move it out to the side, but we're gonna do it using sound design. So we're gonna go into unison, we're gonna bring that up to 2. And I'm not gonna explain everything about the unison, but basically we just clone the voice, and we're gonna create a pitch difference between those 2 voices, and that's gonna be panned. And then we have another option of moving this phase. Now, we have that. And let me see now. I like that. So I brought it down an octave. So that's on A. So we have this layer of A, B. One is higher than the other. Now on A, we are going to, now we're going to mess with a couple things to vary the texture. Because right now it's the same sound over and over and over. It's not going to sound as appealing. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the randomness. So the phase randomness, so the beginning of the note is really important. So if we have a repeating note, it's not going to be as appealing generally as a sound that varies organically, that changes. So what the randomness does is it will change the phase of each of these harmonics, and they'll all still be in phase with each other. They'll just start at different starting points of the phase. So we have that on. And that when we have it all the way on, they're going to go through some pretty extreme jumps, and we don't necessarily want that. We want the timbres to sound consistent but varied. It's sort of like okay. Anyways, all I mean is we should just dial it back some. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to vary the phase ourselves using the variation of the unison. So we'll be changing the unison as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go like this. And we are going to automate it. Cool. And what we get is something like this. You don't need to move this very much. Now we'll go in and look at our EQs and sort of EQ to clean. And we also consider making room for the kick. Even though they're not playing at the same time, there's a little part where they overlap. Cool. So now we have this thing, right? Now let's turn up the harmonizer. And we're going to turn it up like so. That's not necessarily appealing. I want this to be 1 by 1 and 1 by 4 or +4. It'll create just a different harmonic series. Cool. Now, one of the other great things about Harmor is that in addition to this volume envelope, we also have a Pluck, which is essentially the same thing, a Pluck knob, which does very similar things to what this does here. That's going to sound, when you mix them, you get really nice effects. And now we have a varying transient. Things are a little more organic. So as we move this, now my computer's crackling a little bit, but that's okay. I am going to bring on a little bit of soft saturation. Cool. Now we're going to make it lower. Or let's experiment with just different notes. Cool. So we have this. We have a relatively nice timbre, a nice texture. So now we're going to send it to our mixer track, which we already have, and we're going to consider compressing it and altering the spectral content as in its envelope. So we're going to go, and I'm going to open up Maximus to do this. And I'm not going to engage linear phase filters on this just because more CPU. And it's not going to, we're going to change our sound anyway. So it's not super important that we have the exact same sound again. So what we're going to do is we're going to compress the low end, because this will bring our low end and make it, we're going to compress it like so. And we want the attack to be pretty fast and the release to be reasonably okay with our sustain up. And this is going to take our low end, which originally was like this, and turn it into, oh, and you'll notice that as soon as we put it on, that's the greatness. I actually quite like that. That's because it's not linear phase, so we get the crossover problems with the phase shifts and junk. Don't worry about it. Basically, it just sounds different when you put Maximus on it. That's why though. So if we turn it on, we go from this to this, and we're gonna turn up the post. Now, one thing is I'm focusing totally on sound design. I have that kick there just as sort of a reference for, I don't know why I keep playing the kick. We could just look at this, but to me, I'm going to make it fit with the kick, but I'm going to lose my sense of rhythm while I'm doing this because it's on an offbeat. It's this weird thing. Next, we're going to do mids. Mids. You have a lot of options here. I have a 5-part series of Maximus and some of its capabilities, and I'm just utilizing the techniques I share there. High frequencies are mega touchy, but we definitely want our highs to come out. For this, I'm going to zoom up. That's kind of cool. Okay. Side note with this kind of thing, because those types of sounds are mega useful, like that sort of thing. So what I would do to make this really cool is I'd open up another Maximus with that setting on it, and then I'd bypass it and enable it sometimes. Because I wouldn't want to put it in the one I'm mixing with. That's not the greatest idea, but I may consider doing that. That'd sound really cool. I'm going to just take this down. Cool. Now, so we have this going on. We're going to take a look at our notes and maybe write a cooler line. So we're going to start off, we don't want to overwhelm the listener. So we'll start off with something simple. And we're going to automate a couple more things, because the more you automate, the more organic, just the more change you have, the more listeners are like, whoa. So one of the things we're going to automate is we're going to automate the pluck knob. And I'm doing these one at a time. I work pretty fast and just start automating crap everywhere and seeing what's happening. But when I have to explain every single thing I'm thinking about, I will move a little bit slower. So we're going to have this. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna automate the pluck to rise up like right around there, maybe not as fast, just for a moment, and then we'll have it come down pretty quick, and then we'll have it go like really low right here, and then maybe we'll have another rise right there and a little swell back down. And so I'm taking conscious note of what's gonna happen, because this automation it should lend itself to enhance your music, not to be distracting. If you bring it out in unusual ways, then of course it's going to be destructive towards your song instead of constructive. So here we have this. Now, I'm also thinking of additional things I'm going to write here, but I think it'd be cool to have a little thing offbeat, somewhat like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now let's vary up the rhythm, make it more interesting. So that's cool. That moment right there where it happens, I feel like we could have a second note in there. So I'm going to make this one unique. I'm going to go in and I'm going to write in another note. I'm going to make this one lower. So this is something else that we should do. So to make this even better, we should move these, even though we have that tempo variation, I'm going to move it off just a little bit. You want to move them in consistent ways too. You don't want to move some back and forward all the time, because then you'll mess up the feel. You either write a little bit before or a little bit after. If you do both, it's got a different feeling. It's not a bad feeling. It's just, that's not what I want. I want a little bit before that on every other. just so we have that. And then I'm going to change the volume just a little bit. It'll change the way it hits the compressor and distortion, so it'll actually be quite a nice sort of subtle move. And I did not hear that. I may have put it on the wrong thing. Do I have it on the right thing? I'm doing something wrong here. Oh, I need another one of those. So yeah, that's something else with this method. You need to be aware of that. Something you can do that's kind of cool too, which I'll show you in just a sec. So anyways, we have this. That's kind of cool. Now let's do the thing I was going to show you. So you can click on these, and each of these will have, you can automate the min and max. So that's really, really great that they give you the option to do this. So basically we can automate the minimum, and so we can make these become less and less powerful, like wow, wow, wow. Like we can have them bleed out a little bit more as we go. That was an interesting sound I made to demonstrate that idea. So anyways, we have this now. So it's going to release. So this value is essentially going to go up like that. That's what this controls. You're not going to see it, but it's going to happen. Now, one of the things you want to be careful about is losing your sense of groove, because you increase the sustain, you change sort of the rhythm. So if we're going to do a move like this, we should offer a complementary move of making the sound a little more tight with the pluck. So we don't want to elongate the sound in two ways. We're compounding what we're doing right here. It's not a great idea. It could sound really interesting and cool in rhythmic parts. You just got to find something that grooves with you. So you'll mess with this. So I'm taking it down to just, that's sort of a simple solution. And then right here, it'd be cool if we emphasize this. Now we're going to get a little bit more into the composition. So I'm going to move into triplets. So I'm going to go to 1/3 beat. There's 1/3 step, which basically cuts the beat in half. And so you have a little more options, but I just want to move on the beat grid. So I'm going to go do, something like that. So I'm going to go like, just have this downward motion, bump, boom, bump, boom, like that. And I'm going to move. I'm not going to use the triplet grid. I don't even know why I said I was going to do. But anyways, we have this now. And on these, we're going to make these guys short and slightly louder, like that. You may even consider raising them up. This is an opportunity to sort of leave that sub-E area. Maybe a bit longer. Oh, I'm doing it again. We need 2 more of those things for this to work. So bring in 2 more. Yes. And I'm on 1/3 beats, so it's not letting me do it. That's weird. Okay, so here we go. There. Whoops, didn't want to do that. And there. There we go. Do shorter. Maybe closer down. I don't want to go as high. But occasionally you'll find that sounds really cool. That is cool. Okay, so we're going to do that again at the end. And then when you come in again, we want our thing to sound a little more crazy. So we're going to design a second pluck. Now, I'm not going to go through everything I just did again, because it takes a while to really get something that really jives and grooves, as you can see. And you want to be particular about it. You want to get those details. That's what sets the great people apart from the not so great people. So we have something that grooves pretty well. When we come in again, it would be cool to have sort of like a doom, 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 but no drums yet. Like we're going to introduce those as we go. So we are going to do some low, another pluck sound. And I already have one. I've made a couple. This one sounds like this, and it's demonstrated over here at the beginning. Now I'm not going to just use that sound and not explain how it works, because it is a really cool pluck sound. So, okay, so this harmor, the way it works is, you see, it's very similar principles, just applied in very different ways. So, well, same principles applied differently, not necessarily different ways. So we have our pitch. You see, I go, there's one side, there's nothing happening on B. So this is actually a pretty simple harmor. But it sounds so cool. We're taking advantage of that phase randomness so that it sounds different. every time I play it, that adds to its character. Then we're going in. I have the subharmonic all the way up. Without it, like, it makes a huge difference, this thing does. So you want to make sure that that's on. It's at a ratio of 1. I'm playing notes, what is this? 1 octave down on my keyboard. And technically it's 2 because I'm hitting the lower octave. So as you see, I don't filter anything out, but the soft saturation is way up. It's very responsible for a lot that's going on. If I turn my saturation off, it sounds like super lame. So I went with soft saturation because the other saturations, they sound crazy. There's just a lot going on right there that I just don't want to, that's just not what I was looking for. So this is what I went with. And I believe that's actually it. It's really simple sound. It's kind of funny how simple it is. And the pluck is on all the way. And it's just finding the sweet spots on these things. You just got to find those sweet spots where they sound great. Next, we go over to 21, and you see that it has got an EQ, and this is the shape. It's, quite a dramatic shape, actually. It's all over. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Now, this is a very specific shape as well because I'm emphasizing and de-emphasizing certain parts to try and fit it with my kick as well. Because I am still aware that I want to have these 2 kicks if I have the same thing hitting the same spectral area every single time and it's always going off, it's not going to sound as full. If I have 2 complementary things going, like, oh, kick fills this goes away, then this part gets filled, then that goes away, then this part gets filled, we're going to have a much more organic thing. Now, the kick is sort of sounding the whole thing, but the fact that this goes away for a second helps the listener just say, wow, that sounds really big. Basically, that's all they say. So anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to take this first pattern, and it's got the kick in it. I'm going to keep the kick in it because I want to sum the kick up twice. So we're summing it twice, and we're bringing it over here. It's just going to make the kick sound louder. Now, when I'm mixing it, I want to be really aware of this. And when I'm mixing down, I'll probably be able to accomplish an effect that's very, very, very similar. And some people would argue much cleaner and better with just mixing my kick properly, like doing volume automation or whatever. But I like having this as sort of an automated volume automation. And it's a different method of doing it. And so it's therefore going to sound different. You're not going to get the exact same result. So that's another reason that I'd argue that this is cool. But what we're going to do is we're just going to layer this in on the bottom. So when we hit this part, we're going to have this cool kick come in. But we're not going to have any other percussion. I think I said earlier that we weren't going to have any drums come in. We've already got a kick, though. We're going to rock the kick. I'm talking about, like, you know, the hi-hats and stuff. That kick actually is really loud. So I'm going to clone it. I'm going to clone it. I still want the volume boost, but I just don't want it that loud. I don't want to alter the volume of that kick. But I can alter this one, so I'll turn this one down. So we just get a little extra reinforcement. And am I? Yeah, I am. So the sounds are melding together actually quite nicely. What we want to do is we don't want them to meld. We want to emphasize the different parts. So I'm going to add in some rhythmic writing now to make them stand out. So pattern 4, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to write a line. Make sure I'm on the correct synthesizer. And then this one, I'm going to do a triplet. I'm going to go on to the 3rd beat. And make this groove a little bit better. And so we have something like that. So now you see it pops out quite nicely because it's hitting on the offbeats. And on this one, we could make that unique and alter its steel. Now this one requires we're going to do it on beat 3 because it's a strong beat. This one requires a envelope to go along with it, which, there it is. And so you would make adjustments and calls according to that. Go to cell. that's actually really cool how it fits in there. And on this guy, we could make something pop out here. And of course, we haven't even automated anything on him. We could automate stuff and make it sound even more organic. I'll go like this, and then I'll do that. That's better. So as you can see, so you just go through and you do this, and we get a really cool thing going. And then eventually you'll reach a spot where your rhythmic composition has reached a point where it now needs a little more reinforcement if you want to get any more complex, or you want to back off and create something simple to here. That way you can move back into something sort of dynamic. And it's sort of a dance, just getting them to flow. Sometimes I deliberately ignore the dance, because if you listen to it over and over and over, it's kind of an experience seeing how complicated you can get it and still like sort of make sense of what it is you're listening to. So on this guy, let's talk about the loop I selected here. So this loop is part of a bigger loop. That's the loop. And I was deliberately looking for something that had that little hi-hats or whatever. And then what a nice plus to this is that it has this little thing right here at the end. It goes what like this. If I play it. So I really like that. That is cool. Some people would probably get rid of it immediately, but in a way it like pushes you off the beat, but you're emphasizing the beat. It's unnaturally loud. It's a syncopated thing. And so it sounds really cool. So I decided to do that. Some people, what I've seen them do is they'll take little pieces of white noise or of cymbals like this, and they'll do exactly this. They'll reverse it and they'll put it right in front of their kick. That way their kick gets this unusual, like, extra power. So that's a really nifty way of sort of creating momentum in a track. And then here there's a little feel. I just wanted to change it. And if you listen, it's a really subtle feel change, but it goes do 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 do, and it goes back to its sort of straight, where this is like I don't know, it's just got a different feel. And what I did was I tore it apart, I just chopped it up, and then I selected different parts of it with different samples that would lend itself to that feel. So anyways, that's how that came together. And then this is part of another loop. It wasn't actually a fill, and I had it already there, so I had chopped it up and just arranged the elements the way I liked them. So at the end of the day, so this is what we got. And that low end is just a little, I'm not totally satisfied with it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go in and EQ it and try and fix it like that. Yeah, it's this one. Oh yeah, I need to have it. Just want to make sure I was touching the right one. You know what it is? It's because these have different EQs. That was it. So I'm not sure I want to emphasize that low end on this. This one's going to be providing more of the snap in the sound. Yep. Let's see here. I kind of dig that. Let's try it down. cool. The other thing that sometimes is just the octave you selected. This may sound cooler. So if we bring it up an octave and then bring that one part down an octave. See, that sounds a bit tighter than before. So if we go through now, I was actually asked this question: why would you merge clips? And this is actually kind of a good reason why. So I'd have to go through and change all of these back to the correct octave. Well, now I could merge all these clips and change them in all of it at once, and it'd be fixed. I'm not gonna, because I still want them separate. So I don't know. It's kind of cool, that low end. So what we could do on this one, whoops, didn't mean to do that, is come in here and change a couple of these and let it lead down to that bottom part. So we go up the octave A, and now this will act as a passing tone to get to this note. Or on arpeggio, it's F. It's not technically not in the chord, I guess, if we're playing A the whole time. This is a passing tone or whatever. Yeah, that's tight. So you just go through and you mess with sounds like this. I was trying to be kind of in depth here, just showing you all the things, some of the thought processes. I mean, we could talk about combination tones and other effects that can happen when you start playing multiple tones and layers at the same time, and why they contribute to each other like that. Because a lot of people focus so much on the synthesis, and sometimes it's a lot of psychoacoustics, really, and the way you mix. So let's talk about how to get that kick just a little more tight. So we have our kick, and it's coming through pretty nicely. Maybe you don't like the timbre of the kick. I would definitely mess with this some, but let's just assume that it's great. So we're going to side chain it to our harmor channel right here. So I'm going to put down and I'm going to put it after the compression. So this will cause Maximus to bring back level a little bit. So it won't be as tight, but if I don't do it like this, it might sound kind of muddy. Or not muddy, but just weak. It'll be thinner than before. So our compressor will take back some of what our side chain is taking away. And it just does a nice balance. I find that I like to put it in that area of my signal chain. Some people like to put it at the very end so that they know it's completely out of the way. But I think it's good to have a little bit of, overlap. Just a small amount, not too much. But if everything is so chopping everything else off, it's just going to begin to sound thin. So we don't want that. So I'm going to go to compressor, activate my kick, or not activate, just select my kick for sidechain. And let's take a look at where stuff's at. And then this, that's too low. But you know what would be kind of cool is if we brought only these notes up an octave to A. Cool. So we're going now back to the limiter. Cool. So we've gotten a good look at what's going on. We're going to bring our threshold down to just the tip, because that's the transient of what's going on. And what we're going to do is we're going to compress it just a smidge, and we're going to turn our sustain up. Our attack's going to be really fast, and our release is actually going to be pretty fast. And we're going to bring our sustain up. This will snip off some of the beginning. But you can see there's a little bit of purple, but not too much. After our first take gets through, you see that it goes down slower and slower. That's because of our attack, so we need this a little bit quicker. So that's pretty cool. I dig it. So it's not a huge change. If we play it. It's a very subtle one, but it's one that, those types of things tend to stack up and make quite a large difference at the end of the day if you turn them all off. So, so that's my 2 cents on how to do plucks and get a really nice sounding thing going on here. If we, there's more. There is lots more actually, but we're just going to call it good here because I feel like I've just thrown at you so much information. So we didn't talk about phasers or any other options you have to sort of vary your sound, but you can take these general principles, make a pretty dope sounding pluck. If you want a little more sustain, you may consider layering on a sine tone and maybe side chaining that. And the timbres you get out of additive synthesis are substantially different than the timbres you'll get out of FM synthesis, say like using citrus. So yeah, so that's that. If you have any questions, let me know. Support me on Patreon. I really appreciate it. Subscribe and have a blessed day.